What do Frankenstein, Twilight, Inception, and Terminator all have in common? Apparently, they were all inspired by dreams. So I don't need to tell you that dreams are a wellspring of inspiration, and nightmares are a fantasy, sci-fi, and horror writer's best friend. That is, as long as you can be bothered to write them down before you forget them. So in this video, I want to show you my lazy-proof routine of journaling dreams as an inspiration for story ideas that I've been adapting over the last few weeks. And this is part of an effort I've been making to get much better at collecting my story inspirations and ideas when I have them from different sources. So this is the second source, dreams. So the first step is to establish your dream recall routine, which is really a fancy way of saying you need some sort of notebook or note-taking app next to your bed so that you can write down your dreams right after waking up, when you remember all the details, so that you can remember all the unique and random good stuff that is actually good story material. So what I do is I take my notes digitally on my phone, because I can't be trusted to actually transcribe my notes if I took them physically, and also worst handwriting. So easier to write them directly into my phone, or when I'm very lazy and very groggy from sleep, I'll just make a video or like a voice recording of the dream and the specifics of it. And the cool thing is that most phones with voice recording, they have like this option of directly transcribing it into writing itself, so you don't even have to do that. So the crucial thing here is really just getting into the habit of writing down your dreams when you have them. I'm not the type of person who writes down all my dreams. I really just write down the most inspirational ones that have something random, weird, or scary in them that would make for a cool story starting point, or it gives my story something unique that I wouldn't think of myself. Well, unless I'm asleep, apparently. And a trick that I tried out for a while now that really works well for me is that on weekends, when I don't have to go anywhere and I have time, basically what I do is I set my alarm clock 3 hours before I actually have to get up, so that it wakes me up. Then I'll go back to sleep, and what happens most often is that you kind of fall back into this REM sleep cycle of where you have like your most vivid dreams. And I kind of use that sometimes to make it more likely that I have like vivid dreams and scenarios that are more than just kind of like those flashes of images that you get. And in a way, that's kind of a technique that you can apply so that you can almost consciously try to have dream inspiration. Like I said, I'm only doing it on the weekends or when I'm free, because you don't want to mess up your sleep schedule completely, but it's a way that you can try it out. Then step number 2 is to create your dream journal. So this is really just a place where you note down your ideas and where you organize them in a way that you can make use of them later. So if you remember my other video on having story ideas, where I gathered up story elements from stories I like, that kind of idea, I note that down in the same place where I note down my dream inspirations. So it's really, if you have like I said, a cool idea for this would make a scary setting or something like that, you would write it down in here from either dreams or from other sources. So for example, what I do is when I come across a documentary where they show like a really interesting abandoned place that would make a nice setting, that kind of idea, I note that down in the same place where I note down my dream inspirations. And what I do is I organize it basically by setting, character, and moments. So it's really, if you have like I said, a cool idea for this would make a scary setting or something like that, you would write it down in here so that you have like this starting point that you can come back to. Or what I often have is a scenario, like almost a starting scene, and those I categorize by moments. And here, for example, the example that I have today is more of a sort of conflict, riot, battle kind of scene, and that I would categorize here, so that then when I need some inspiration for something specific, I can come back to. And what I do is I organize it basically by setting, character, and moments. Is that it's organized in the same way as I organize my reference library, which is the moments and stuff from other stories that I find inspirational that I really like. So it's the same principle. The only exception that I make is when I have some sort of dream inspiration for, let's say, a creature, and right now I'm working on a story where that creature would fit into. I don't put it in the dream journal, I put it directly into my notebook specifically for that story. So if I had something that would fit, not the chosen one, I would directly put it in there and work with it from there. That's why for me this dream journal is really a storing place for ideas in general, that I want to have my own kind of library of story elements and ideas and stuff that I can come back to and build on over time. So then step 3 is how exactly do you store those dream ideas, right? And how do you flesh them out before you note them down so that later on you can make the best use of them. So taking the example that I had from before, where basically this is my example, right? So the scene that I had is some sort of, there is a conflict between two groups. I noted down on the fly that it's a Walking Dead kind of group, basically just using some sort of descriptor to remember what it should feel like. In this scene, it's more like a group of people that are very mixed in backgrounds. They don't necessarily know each other. They're mixed together. They've come together because of a shared purpose or a shared fate or something like that. Who knows? I don't. And it's really just, those are probably the protagonists. Then there was some sort of female character who seemed to be like the viewpoint character or the protagonist, who was looking for some hybrid creature. What kind of hybrid creature? No idea. And also there was kind of this question in there of the father of this hybrid creature not being known, and for some reason it's important to know who the father is, and who the father is might change how things are affected. Again, no idea. Those are really just kind of like those weird scenario things that you have from your dreams, right? When you wake up, where you have like all those open questions that when you were asleep seem to make sense, but now that you're awake, you kind of have just like those loose ends. That's why I really like those dream ideas as starting points for stories, because it basically puts you in the same position as a first reader would be in, where you get like a scenario and you have to start to figure out what is going on. You have all those questions, and then you start to try to fill in the answers based on what you're seeing is happening or what it could be, right? So that's the same starting point that I, as the writer, make when having those ideas as my starting point, right? Just basically looking at what I've got and starting to fill in some elements based on what makes sense while looking through the idea, or also because sometimes I already have stories that I'm working on, trying to make the elements from the dream fit into the story that I have right now and starting to merge them. So those are all things that I do when writing down the dream in my notebook. Then for all the stuff that I don't know, I basically put the question marks so that I have like those starting points when I start to use this idea in the actual story. So at this point, what you can do is, like I said, start to flesh out basically the elements that aren't that clear. If you remember certain details, you can fill them out here as well. Like I said, here, for example, I clarified what I meant with Walking Dead kind of group of people so that later on I would remember it better. And also something new that I started to do that is really cool is use AI generated images to capture what it looked like in your dream. So here, for example, what that could look like is you see somewhat what the imagery would look like. There is some burning warehouse in the background, there's some sort of riot going on, and there's some sort of military intervention roundup. Who those parties are, no idea. Why exactly this conflict over this hybrid broke out, again, no idea. And there's also this female protagonist who is looking for this hybrid child. Is this point of view character or is she like a main character? No idea. But it's basically a really nice way of giving you this visualization of your original inspiration, capturing it. Again, what I do usually is I note down the idea when I woke up, and then later the same day I tend to note down the stuff in my notebook and also generate the AI imagery so that it's somewhat close to when I originally had the idea, so that I remember what it looked like, right? So that you get kind of like the feel and the tone, right? I feel that's a large aspect of using these kinds of ideas, to get the tone and the feeling and all that stuff, because it's basically hand delivered to you. So all those things, I store it like this, and then when I need some sort of scene, starting point, character or whatever, I can come to this notebook and basically browse through my notes of my own subconscious. And then the final step is, how do you actually integrate this stuff into your story, right? So I already touched on this a bit, but here with this example, because there's some sort of hybrid creature and because there's a large cast of characters, this does fit fairly well into my Not the Chosen One future storyline setting. If you remember, there were a lot of viewpoint characters, not all of them are fleshed out yet, and at a later stage we will get to when the world is starting to fall apart and there are different fractions. So this might fit in there somewhat. Also because it's a sci-fi story where there are alien creatures, this whole hybrid thing can come into play. There the question is, of course, how exactly does it tie to all the story material that I've already got? And the way that I now go about using this inspiration is really asking questions. So what I like to do with an idea that is so specific in the sense of what it looks like and the scenario is to treat it as if it's already part of the story and I'm just kind of like uncovering it as a reader. So obviously while then writing and fleshing out the stuff, I will alter aspects to it, and this whole original dream idea will probably be heavily altered, but I like to treat it as if it's already completely part of the story, so that I can start to sort of ask questions in the sense of, you know, looking for logical conclusions to how this ties into the stuff that I already know about my story. And what happens for me most of the time is that that really works very nicely, because your brain tries to, you know, make stuff fit, and because it's storytelling and it's all fictional and stuff, a lot of stuff does fit in quite nicely. Obviously you do need some sort of story that has those fantasy sci-fi elements often, so that it's easier to fit them in. So for example, in my case here, having some sort of hybrid creature is really easy to fit in, because that's a possibility in this world and we don't really know what is possible and isn't possible from the reader's perspective, right? If you had like a more realistic story, stuff like that is of course much harder to do. But in this case, what I now would do, the first question is, what is the hybrid creature and why does this hybrid creature matter? Because that's the whole center of this scene, right? That's the whole thing that they are fighting over. So figuring that part out, and there are obviously a lot of ways that this then could go. It could be kind of like, okay, so hybrid between what is the first question? Human and this alien creature. So then is the question, so if the alien creature originally wasn't really like this smart thing, and then going from there, what are those opposing fractions? What do each of them want, right? What could they want? The father question would be here something that might actually get completely deleted from now my work process in trying to integrate these ideas. So maybe trying to have like this mystery aspect of not knowing who the father of this hybrid creature is too far of a stretch and doesn't really make sense in the sense of the rest of the story. Or sometimes those really weird questions that don't really make any sense are like the best starting point to find unique ways of how the story could play out, right? So if we say, so it matters who the father of this creature is, then you could basically say that the father is either an alien, and there are different alien types, right? And that means that this hybrid creature evolves in different ways depending on who the father is. Or you could say that the father is a human, and then it would basically affect on what side the hybrid creature is, because there are different human factions. But then again, the question is, does this child know their own father? Does that matter? You know, all those kinds of things that basically are like the best starting point to start brainstorming and start figuring out new elements of the story. So yeah, this is really a technique that you can apply the way that I showed you, in the sense of capturing your story ideas, but also a way of bringing a lot of randomness, uniqueness, and really just new ways of looking at your story into the story construction process, into the plotting process. And again, obviously not every time when you have like random stuff like that, it works out and enhances your story. Sometimes it's really just a lot of stuff that you add in that doesn't really make sense. The point of this is really more to have those unique elements that you can start to work with, so that you have a lot of input material that you can start to sort through and figure out what fits your story, what makes it better, and what is fun to basically flesh out for yourself as the writer. So yeah, this is my process. I hope there's something in here that is interesting to you and that you want to incorporate into your own process. And if you have your own dream journaling process or how you use dreams as a starting point, let me know what your process look like, what the techniques are that you apply. So maybe there are some best practices that I can integrate into my own process as well. And other than that, I will see you next time.